Hey guys, I think I just finally finished getting everything all finalized and paperwork done. So I'm going to keep doing the read alouds because, why not? So as long as they keep teams open, I'm going to keep reading the chapters. I won't have questions. If you just want to check in every day and, see what happens in the book, I'll be continually posting the read alouds, okay? So we are at the second part of chapter 15. After the wolves came and attacked the herd, so they lost some cows in the swamp, but they're going to move on anyways. For another week, they stayed on an open prairie skirting just to the south of the line of trees that marked swampland. Then, one day, the trees appeared on the horizon ahead of them as well as to the north, and as they moved forward, a wall of tall cypress blocked their view to the south. For 2 more days, they moved westward, letting the cows graze and set their own pace, and each day the corridor between the north and the south trees became narrower, and the wall ahead of them loomed closer. Tobias rode from the wagon over to Skillet. "I don't like the look of this," he said. "Seems like we're heading into some kind of dead-end canyon, right into a swamp. I hope there's a way through it. If there ain't, we're going to have 3 or 4 days of backtracking to do. Don't look good, and we sure ought not to push him into a swamp after we've seen what happened back at that other one." That's where the cows had died. By late afternoon, the wall in front of them was only a half-mile away, and the north and south corridor had narrowed to less than a mile. Heat was coming from the ground, and it was stifling, and the air was so thin that the horses puffed as they walked. Tobias told the men to stop the herd and circle them until they were settled, and then come back to the wagon for supper. He hoped that there'd be no bears or wolves here, for if the herd spooked for any reason, there was nowhere to run for them to seek safety. Emma cooked the last of the smoked beef and also baked sweet potatoes, and the men ate silently. She said to Tobias, "Tomorrow you're going to have to shoot a deer or kill one of the cows. There's no meat left, and the flour's almost gone too. We're going to have to make kunti to get us through. I'll see to it as best as I can." Remember that kunti flour was the Native Americans taught them how to make? What worries me more than victuals is this fix we're in. In the morning, I'll have scout ahead and see if there's a way out of here without turning back. "This place spooks me," Frog said. "I got a feeling somebody's watching us. I don't know how to explain it, but something ain't right. Times like this, it pays to be dumb like Bonzo." Bonzo either didn't hear the remark or he ignored it. He stuffed another potato peel into his mouth and chomped, paying no attention to the conversation. "Yeah, I got that same feeling," Skillet said. "Black man say someone walking on your grave and strong enough to make a flesh crawl." "You men," Emma said excitedly, dipping herself a plate of stew. "You see ghosts everywhere. All you're doing is remembering the wolves, and we may never see them wolves again, and when it comes down to the truth, all y'all really worry about is your stomachs and whether or not you're going to get a meal." "Now that there's a fact, Miss McIvy," Frog said. "The only thing that counts in this life is a woman's cooking pot. You got any more food in yours, Miss Emma?" "Almost," Emma said, taking the plate. "There's a little bit left, but you just proved what I said." Zek was listening, but he seldom broke into a conversation when the adults were talking, but now he spoke up. "Ishmael feels it too, Papa. I can put my hand on his neck and feel him tremble. He knowed the wolves were coming before we seen 'em, before the cows got all riled up. He sees things that nobody else can see, and he has a way of letting me know. He ain't happy here, Papa. He says we ought not to be here. He's an Indian pony, and he has a way of knowing things that we don't." Everyone got silent for a moment, wondering if this were truth or fantasy coming from a small boy who talked as if he really believed it. Then Tobias said, "Ishmael is a horse, Zek, and that's all. He's just a horse like all the others. It's time we stop this gibberish and go on watch. Me and you are going to go first. That way, if Ishmael has something special to say, maybe I could hear it too." "You don't have to believe me, Papa," Zek said. "I'm just trying to tell you that Ishmael ain't happy here. I can tell when he is and when he ain't." Tobias got up from the fire. "All right, let's go before you get me too spooked to ride watch. Tomorrow morning we'll leave this place one way or another." There was no moon during the first of the watch, and it was impossible to distinguish cows from trees. Tobias and Zek rode only by sound, hearing the swish of a tail or the thump of a hoof, circling what they hoped was the herd. The fire back at the wagon was their only beacon, and without it, they would have had no sense of direction at all. Tobias sat still in the saddle for a moment, staring blindly into the darkness, thinking what a catastrophe it would be if danger struck the herd in such a sea of ink. If the cows ran, there would be no way of knowing which direction they took, and with swamp on 3 sides of them, they'd have to hunt for the cows one by one, just as he and Zek had hunted them in the swamp beyond the hammock. He moved the horse forward again, feeling his way, not wanting to bump into a cow and frighten it, and then he stopped and he listened and he heard a faint tinkling sound like bells. The sound went away, and then it came again, this time closer. The next time he heard it, it seemed to be moving back into the swamp. Zek ran up to him swiftly, a small horse, sure-footedness in the darkness. "Did you hear something, Papa?" he asked, holding the reins tight to stop the horse's dancing. "Well, I thought I did, but it could have been the wind in the trees. Did you?" "Yeah, it sounded like bells. I heard it 2 or 3 times, and then it went away." "Yeah, that's what I heard too, some tinkling. It's for sure nobody's belled a milk cow and turned it loose out here. Must have been something in the trees. Well, whatever it was, I haven't heard it again." Just before the watch ended, the moon came from behind a cloud bank, casting a yellow glow over the herd and the trees. Although he felt no movement, Tobias discovered that the cows were a quarter-mile closer to the edge of the swamp. He wanted them to move back, but did not do so for the fear of spooking them. When he got back to the wagon after being relieved, Emma stirred and said, "Well, did you see any buggers out there tonight?" she said in jest, not exactly expecting an answer. "No, Emma, I heard bells." Zek heard it too. "I told him it was just the wind in the trees, but it wasn't. It was bells." Bells? It was a tinkling sound at first, and it came close to the herd once, and then it went away. Neither one of us didn't hear it any more after that. Why would anybody be out here in the wilderness with bells? I don't know, but come sunup, I aim to find out. All right, yeah, I told you guys this was a long chapter, so I think maybe we'll read a little bit more. So Tobias left before breakfast the next morning. Zek wanted to come with him, but he said no, he would do this alone. If there was a way through the swamp, he was going to find it and come back as soon as possible. He approached the line of cypress trees reluctantly, walking the horse slowly, looking back at the grazing herd and at the wagon beyond. It seemed to him that all this land that they had moved over for 3 days was a funnel directing them into this one impassable spot. His instinct was to turn back now, to backtrack to the herd and leave this place as hurriedly as possible, but he kept walking the horse straight into the woods. The land looked the same here as where the cows had buried themselves, towering, bald cypress, thick clumps of lush ferns, fallen rotten limbs covered with moss, palmetto clumps and coca plum bushes. There were also pools of stagnant water covered with slime, cut in places by moccasin trails. Tobias followed a small ridge of higher ground, moving gingerly, remembering what had happened to the cows that ran into the sinkhole muck. He already knew there was no way to move cattle through here, but he did not turn back. He was a mile into the swamp when he heard the bells. The one thing that he had come looking for. Not a passage for the herd, but the strange sound that had come out of the night. It was off to the right. No more than 100 yards distance, tinkling, moving, and then stopping, and then moving again. He sat in the saddle in a daze, not thinking of the herd or Emma or Zek or anything but the bells, somehow knowing that if he sat still enough, it would come to him. The horse whined and backed away a few steps as the sound grew louder, but it came past the last clump of palmetto and stood right before him. The man was beyond age. He was so old that his skin was cracked like alligator hide. He was almost 7 feet tall, and his hair was tied on the top of his head with bands of reeds, making him seem even taller. He wore a girdle of silver-colored balls and small brass bells around his neck were 6 strings of shells. His wrists were covered with bracelets of fish teeth, and his entire body was stained red. Tobias stared, unbelieving at first, and then believing, but feeling no fear. He knew that this was not an apparition or a hallucination, but a man, a flesh and blood man beneath all those strange trappings. There was a calmness about him that dissipated fear, making Tobias calm too, an overwhelming calmness that flooded his body and caused him to slump forward in his saddle. For several moments not a word was spoken, and then the old man said, "I am a Timucuan, the last of my people. I am the keeper of the graves. Soon I will join the others. We came here a long time ago to hide from Spanish soldiers. I am the only one left, and I have lived beyond my time." Tobias said, "We didn't know. We're lost, and we're trying to find a passage for the herd." "Do not bring your cows in here," the old man cautioned. "In here is only death. If you come in here, you will never return. Go back the way you came. This swamp is a burial ground for all who enter. Many people have known this to be true. My people." "Is there no other way? We're trying to reach the sea to the west. If we turn back, it means 3 or 4 days of traveling." "It is best that you travel those days then. Only death awaits you if you enter. Do not go into the south swamp either. Go all the way back and around the swamp. It is the only way." Without speaking any further, the old man turned and walked away. Tobias wondered if he had really seen this or not, but as he listened to the bells fading into the distance, he knew. Zek rode to him swiftly. "Did you find it, Papa?" "Find what?" Tobias responded absently. "A way to get through." There is no way to get through. We're going to have to turn the herd around and go back. It's the only way. The bells, Papa, though. Did you find the bells? It was just the wind. Only the wind. Ride on ahead and tell the men to move the cows out of here right away. Hurry now. Tobias sat still for several minutes thinking of the old man who had been in there alone for such a long time. Then he put his horse into a trot and he headed for the herd. Whoa. So that's kind of creepy. Saw this old 7-foot tall Indian guy that warned him that this place was only had death. Yikes. All right, we'll see what happens next. Bye, guys.